2, 1. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 10th Skype session. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Impaction does, and we'll get started with the conversation. So we're Impaction. We're simply a place where people can discuss ideas that make the world a better place. The purpose of our Skype session is we bring people together from around the world to talk about various ideas and trends and even mentorships with people around the world who are in the social impact space, so we can hear things from other people's perspectives. So we're going to introduce ourselves and we can get started with the topic. So I'm Shivani. I'm one of the co-founders of Impaction and I live in Chicago. Sukanya, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Sukanya. I'm a graduate student at NYIT and I live in New York. Tanvi, you want to go next?
Hi, I am Tanvi. I am a product manager with Impaction and I'm based off of Boston now. Maribel.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Maribel and I'm based in DC. When I'm not teaching recently social entrepreneurship, I'm photographing or fighting for immigrant rights.
Awesome. Roger, you're going to go next?
Yeah, I'm Roger. I'm up in Boston, and I run a group called Found Something and a startup consulting group called Idea Track.
Great, thank you. Ina, how about you?
Hi, I'm Ina. I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, and right now I'm on my gap year before I head to school over in Boston at Harvard, and most of my work kind of deals with women's empowerment and feminist issues.
Great, thank you. And then Garvita.
Hello everyone, I'm Garvita, I'm from India and I'm a student, but I also run an organization called Wild Waste, which aims at changing the way people look at water, making them more mindful about water consumption practices and to stop trivializing this very precious resource. And apart from this, I also work with young people being between the age of 12 to 18 because I'm 19, and I basically help them find their love for change making and grow their initiatives.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. So today we're going to be discussing the growth of women's empowerment. In preparation for this call, we read 4 articles that will guide the discussion that address various startups and organizations and their work in this field. We're going to be talking about girls' health education, Sweet Society Apparel, and Fitted for Work that have opened doors for women in terms of job opportunities, education, and health. And we have a lot left to do, as we have been reminded by the last article as well, when we found that there was a teenage girl in Nepal that had died because she was living in a period tent and she suffocated. So there's a lot left to do in the health education world. So let's just kick this session off with our first topic about this line of work. And we're going to be talking about the peer-to-peer model first, which we saw in the Girls Health Ed article that tries to empower girls through health classes. So basically in this curriculum that they have adapted to fit the cultural context of any classroom in the world. They have modules that talk about nutrition and body image and physical activity, personal care and hygiene, and sexual reproduction. And a critical component of this curriculum and how it can be translated or adapted to fit any cultural context is peer-to-peer model, where they vet or train instructors in their local environment to build that level of accountability and trust over the curriculum that they're integrating in the space. So I do think that this is critical to any type of international development work. And it would just be really interesting to see how this curriculum is actually translated in the classroom and how they're able to vet people so efficiently in this space, especially if it's relatively a foreign topic, such as girls' health education, which is such a niche.
I can start if you want. Sorry, I kind of missed my introduction. I'm Bethany. I'm a second-year graduate student in international affairs, and I'm in Milwaukee. But when I was reading this peer-to-peer article, I just kept thinking about how appropriate this would be for Peace Corps programming. I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa for 2 years, and this is the exact kind of programming that we were trying to do. I didn't specifically work in health. I was working in economic development. But I did like partake in a program sort of similar to this that is called Grassroots Soccer, and they have a bunch of different categories, but they do different health topics, including like malaria and girls' health education, but then they also do like financial planning and things like that for youth. And so I was thinking that one of the ways to make an idea like this actually sustainable, or a way to kind of like test it in the field, would be to partner with programs that already have that sort of like grassroots. Is that my speaker? Okay. That sort of grassroots developed and Peace Corps volunteers work with local partners that could be part of this like peer-to-peer training, so that these programs are sustainable when they leave.
I apologize. Thank you, Bethany, for the introduction as well. And if everyone can mute their speaker as well, someone else is talking, that'd be great.
Can I jump in to piggyback on that? So I think that's a great idea if you can find a way to, whenever you're starting a company, having different channels that you can reach out to. And so connecting with the program you were doing before, for anybody who's got an idea similar to this, would be fantastic. And I guess, you've been on the inside of that of that group. What would be the best route for somebody to go who's, say, if they were going to email somebody or cold call somebody, who would they reach out to start that kind of conversation? I imagine there's a lot of incoming requests for things like this from, a lot of different kinds of people. And it's difficult to sort through, where's the good stuff in all that incoming material. So how can somebody who's looking to form one of those partnerships distinguish themselves, or make sure they get in through the right channels, so they don't just get thrown out with the rest of the water?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I mean, Peace Corps is a huge bureaucracy. And so, like, I would think finding some connection that you have, and kind of going in from that angle, which, if there's interest for that, there's returned Peace Corps volunteers in like every city, and a lot international too, that I'm sure could like make connections. And based on my experience with Peace Corps, probably they would want to pilot it at like a smaller level and like see what works best in individual settings, which this program is like inherently set up to be like translatable to different cultural circumstances. So that's really helpful to begin with. But yeah, it would be better if you could pilot it with maybe a smaller, less bureaucratic organization, because then you wouldn't have that issue where you have to like get through the U.S. government level bureaucracy. But I think it would just depend on like utilizing your network and figuring out what the best way to like cut into a market to practice something would be. That would be my thoughts, at least.
I don't want to put you on the spot on that one, but you brought up a really good thing, like piloting it somewhere so you can come to. I was just talking with a person the other day. He was like, I'm going to apply for funding from NASA. And I was like, sweet. That'd be awesome if NASA would give you money to build your little space houses that you want to. But I get. So when you say piloted in this like smaller, less bureaucratic organizations, that makes perfect sense. In this example, I'm just curious, like off the top of your head, are there anything you can think of? I know I'm putting you totally on the spot on this, but what would be an example of a smaller one? Something that came to my head was maybe going to a public school and seeing if they'll let you. I don't know, but you tell me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would really depend on, like, if it was me and I was trying to go pilot Peace Corps, to see if they had ideas based on like their current posts, just because that would be my first thought. But also there's other organizations, like smaller organizations that like work with Peace Corps and similar organizations in like a grant funder capacity. So I'm thinking of like World Connect. They do like grant funding for projects, Peace Corps projects and other projects like internationally. And so getting funding from them to pilot this would like inherently come with their connections. So that would be kind of how I would go about it. But
going off of that, just adding to like reaching out to local organizations or local groups or just smaller scale. I think just like as a personal example, I found it every time that I've tried to. So like, I guess I should start by saying I run girl empowerment programs in my community, and I tried to start off big, and like I tried to go to like Girls Inc. and like some big nonprofits and like reach out to them and be like, hey, will you like take on my program, like this is why it's unique, and I like never really received a response. But then I found like really talking to like local leaders and like community members that really gets the idea off the ground, just because they want to support you and nobody really reaches out to them in the first place. So like for you, I would like suggest like just going into people that you know in your local like Boston community, or even like in suburbs and places like that where most people don't actually reach out to the actual organizations. Like for example, there's a really small center in my community called the Malone Center, and they do a lot of things for underprivileged youth. And so I reached out to them, and I literally did nothing, and they're just like, oh, here's $12,000, please run your program. And then they were like begging me to run it. And so like I think it really goes on to like finding the people that have the same like gap as you have. So like if you can't find people who are listening to your idea, try to find people who are on the other side that nobody's coming to them with ideas for, and then you're going to be able to find like a really good partnership. So I would say that's like one of the ways I would go about it.
Did you say that you talked to them and they were just like, here's $12,000, run the program?
Yeah, they literally did that. And that happened twice.
So,
and I thought, like
are you
another
kidding?
basically. Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. So I mean, I work with founders all the time, and they would be dying for that kind of
Yeah.
not only to hear that story, but also like how on earth like did you, and I'm sure there's a lot of thinking and work went into that. I mean, that could be really helpful to a lot. We'll talk after if you know how to do that.
Yeah. It's like it also helps because like I guess I'm a kid and not many kids reach out to them, so like that helps a lot. But I mean, like you just have to find like find what they want, I guess. Go to the people that nobody's reaching out to, and they'll do anything to help you. So that's what I'd say.
I'd just like to pitch in for a second. So I haven't directly worked in the women's empowerment space, but I've worked with a lot of people who have, and I happen to know this person who personally goes to villages in the in central India, in this state called Jharkhand, and she does programs and modules on she does programs and modules on making girls aware of their bodies, menstruation, and how to make it not a taboo, which it is still in our country, big time. And what I really learned from the way she pilots her programs is she does not really wait for an outside organization to support her, but she takes out her time and goes and spends her time with those young girls, helps them understand, helps their families understand. And that's what she uses as um, her you could say that's what she uses as her backing later to go to organizations when she needs the funding. So those girls and the fact that their mindsets have changed really become her testimony. And I think that's a really really cool way, because today they are helping her take this program forward in villages around the places where they live. So in many ways, she kind of also empowered them to find their own voice and help other girls around them solve issues that they had. So I think that's something that can definitely come out of a module such as this one.
Absolutely. And one thing that I really do want us to touch on is how this can be accessible to everyone. I think that's a very critical point, but how can the instructors work and even manage or market something like this in ways that an everyday person can even train others or share the word or spread the message to others in a very resourceful way, and ways that community members might even be more attentive because they have that level of trust in that community. So, what are ways that people can level the playing field and where everyday people can train others to work in this way?
So one of the ways that I found, I'm basically again piggybacking on what Ina and Gargi said, that even I have noticed that, especially in India, we have a lot of house help. So basically, these are all young girls who come to our houses, help with the chores. And I have seen many of these girls being eager to learn something new, especially if there is someone of their age living in that house. Like for me, the girl that used to come to our house, she always saw me working on the computer or talking in English, for example. And they are always so eager to learn, and they even pick up a lot of stuff just by listening to us. And I have, well, I don't know, it's probably me, but I have seen a lot of girls who have come forward to me or my mom and asked themselves, like, what you guys are doing or what you guys know. It's very important, especially for her and her friends to learn. So she would really like to learn a new language or learn how to read from us. She was really vocal about it, and it's not just us. She approached everyone who um, whose houses she used to go to, and apparently all of them helped. So that is something that really, I don't know, it was really surprising that this girl is being so vocal about it. Like, okay, me and my community need this, and if nobody can come to us, I am coming to you, so why not I take it, all the knowledge from you, and then pass it on. And this way, many of the other ladies, especially the housewives who used to stay at home mostly with these girls, started teaching them automatically. So in my community, this became like a normal thing suddenly. This was something becoming very popular. Every lady was doing it after the husbands were off to work and the children were off to school. So I don't know, maybe in this case, the girl herself started this conversation, but it just struck me that what if we go out to these people who probably don't know what they're missing out, and we encourage them to kind of talk about it, stand up for themselves. Even if we do it for one, like this one girl did it, and now all the girls that come in my community as house helps are learning something new every time. So I think this is also a way of spreading it really fast and kind of getting everyone into this movement. It's not like a one person thing anymore.
I just want to thank Tanvi for mentioning that the power of relationships and even I would say beyond social entrepreneurship, the changes we can all do, like you said. I recently had a conversation too with, and I'm not involved in women's empowerment in the same way an organization might be. But I take very seriously when women in my family come to me with issues as it relates to it. And I think if we all can do that and be like this more receptive, non-judgmental person for the young woman in our lives or the girls in our lives, then they would feel more comfortable coming to us. One of the biggest issues I see, even in the United States, and we're supposedly, should be more open-minded about these things. The young woman mentioned they never had any support when it came to their health as a woman. They don't understand it. They didn't know who to go to. And now they're older and they're telling me. So it really comes to show that at the root, I think this issue is the stigma of a woman's health. And if we can break down that barrier by being that woman or being that person in the family that says, you can come to me when these things come up, let's have a conversation about it when you're ready, then that's very powerful too. And you don't need funding for that. You just need to be, available.
I want to jump into that part of the conversation too, especially the piece about right before with Tanvi, but at least right into what Maribel is talking about. And it's how do we find those people in those situations like Tanvi did, or how do we make ourselves available to people who actually need the help, like Maribel is saying? I think a lot of times we end up in the spot where we're sitting in our office or in a big building at the top floor. How are we going to do it? One thing that I've kind of been thinking about our experience was what if we, because it doesn't take all that much work to like build websites, especially nowadays. And it doesn't take that much work to, Shivani, it doesn't take that much work to start a company and build a company. And I wonder how much we can almost humble ourselves and be like, okay, I'm going to go take a job at a grocery store or a job in a restaurant where these people, especially women, are being, put down by the man in a variety of ways, and then kind of lead from that area, build a coalition of the cash register swipers or the bus people or the chefs, and then almost find entrepreneurial talent in those groups and bring it out rather than hustling around MIT or Harvard like, where's the kid with the good grades? It's like I don't know, so almost like I think of it almost like Fight Club, like we're going into building a coalition of the workers movement, right? And then sprouting up once it's all together. I don't know, that might be idealistic, but the point is humbling ourselves to go into places where we wouldn't normally be, or it's not sitting in the nice building with millions of dollars of funding, and then seeing what we can build from the ground up, rather than coming in and I'm the leader of this program, everybody come to it, like I'm actually in working with you and now I'm leading you all together from a kind of thing. Okay, that's enough.
No, that's a great point. And I think I've never thought too much about that because I come from a community where these issues exist and the people around me just see me as a person they could always talk to. Not that I start an enterprise or anything, I just listen and give advice. But it's a balance, right? For the people that have very nice lifestyles and want to keep that up, but also want to make a difference. There's this idea that I hear a lot where, you can have a win-win, is do good by doing well. And at times, personally, I sacrifice a lot to do good. Not sure if it has to be that way, but it's a good point. It's how many people are willing to do that, and if we can all go into places where and share our knowledge so other people can use that and use their own skills and their own gifts to continue that would be transformational. And I think that's the power of community building. And Shivani knows about humanity hubs. They're not online, but they are very big on community building. And if people would join community, make time for people, like you said, well, I'm in the office building, I don't have time for anyone. But if you make time for people, you really reach a lot just by being present, and then together you come up with things.
That we're having a great conversation, but I think we should shift to sustainable fashion. And I know people have thoughts about sustainable fashion, so I'll just leave the floor open.
Can I start with the what is that ad slogan, the slogan or the ad that says the best thing? Oh, it's a sustainable fashion brand. It says the best thing would be to just for the environment would be to just walk around naked, but we're the second best. I forget which brand said that, but that stayed with me. I think it put things into perspective, right? That sustainable fashion isn't all that sustainable in comparison to what could be, right? The alternative. But in the light that we have to wear clothes, what can we do?
Could I go next? I guess. Okay, so I am really, really like into the whole sustainable fashion thing. I'm very, very like involved with all this, so I just love talking about this. But Maribel, the brand you're talking about, I think is Reformation. So
yes.
like I gotta talk about it. But I guess the problem that I've really noticed when like getting into the whole sustainable fashion thing and just like looking into even like starting my own like sustainable fashion company is that they're really like if you look into like the most sustainable things, even like Reformation and Everlane, those are the two best like most well-known sustainable fashion things for or brands for like women and men, and they really aren't that sustainable. Like for example, Everlane takes pride in being extremely transparent and everything, and like you look at their worker wages and that's really nice. You look at how they make their materials and it's all seems like really good, but if you look into it, it's actually not doing as much as we think it's doing, because like for example, recently they started making jackets out of plastic water bottles, which in marketing perspectives and like if you just look at it without questioning it, that sounds really, really cool, and that sounds like, oh, that's making a huge difference in our environment. But if you look at the energy that it takes to recycle those water bottles and put them in jacket form, you're actually not sustaining anything. It's the same as before. So it's completely all marketing. So I don't want to say like Everlane doesn't know that, but even if they even if they do know that, it's clearly just like all marketing, and it's all just like corporate, and they're just trying to get, you know, environmentalists and like feminists to buy their clothes. But in reality, like it's really not doing anything at all. And I guess like adding on to that, that just kind of goes with any like environmentally or sustainably marketed like product, even for like cars or for anything. Like it just, we really have to look at it in a full perspective, because even though they might market it and on the surface it might seem sustainable, if you look into how that product is made, like do they use solar energy to recycle the water bottles? Does it actually take more energy to recycle the water bottles? You're just actually seeing it's not having any impact at all. So like I think that's really something that we need to consider when buying from brands and all of that. And I think that's an unfortunate thing, because I've found it extremely difficult to find a brand that actually takes all those things into account. And so I think if someone can speak to that, if we can like, I don't know, I really don't know the solution, but I've just found it really interesting.
So I actually have a question off of that. So based off of the second article that we read about Sweet Society Apparel, they did use like their fashion brand, their sustainable fashion brand. Their apparel is apparently environmentally ethical, and I thought that that was great. But now that you bring this point up, you bring up a really good point, because they make their material from recycled plastic water bottles and fishing nets. But then the question that I have is that like apparently all of their profits go to their factory in Cambodia, called Bethany, and it employed like 19 women that have been rescued from sex trade. So I mean, in terms of environmentally ethical, they're branding themselves as that. They might not be that, but their profits are still going into this factory that's helping women get jobs, essentially. So I have like in terms of impact, maybe it's not environmentally impactful, but it's still women's empowerment, and maybe it's impactful in that realm. And should they market it in that category instead of environmentally ethical? But also, I have a second question. So if they market themselves as being like helping women's empowerment rather than environmentally ethical, then do some of their profits go down? Because you said it, like feminist and environmentally conscious people are buying into this brand and it's directly affecting their business. So yeah, there can be different aspects of impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very like it's first of all, like, it's a very complicated issue, and I think it's because of how interconnected all these different social issues are, it becomes even more complicated. And I think like you can market yourself, like I guess the issue now with like climate change being such a huge thing and it's literally coming so fast, you can't really market yourself as a brand that empowers women if it's not also ethical. And that's like the huge issue because climate change, the truth is that it disproportionately affects women. It disproportionately affects minorities. And so you can't say, oh, I'm donating money to this factory in Cambodia when your clothes are actually just hurting the environment, which is having an impact on the place where the factory is. So like an example that I would give is like factories that are most of the time like factories for like big companies or like fashion companies tend to be in like developing countries because that's where you can make the wages low as possible, and that's where like companies benefit. And so water, for example, gets the water there is like extremely bad. The factory ruins it. There's runoff everywhere. But when you look at, for example, girls' education in developing countries, one thing that I've learned by working for like girls' education initiatives is that the reason that like lots of girls aren't able to go to school is because their job is to walk 10 or 20 miles every day and find clean water for their family. And they can't do that because all of the factories around them are causing runoff. They're causing runoff into their water. And so instead of going to school, they're finding clean water for their families. And so like this becomes a huge issue because we're not just looking at, oh, okay, this company, we're donating money to like Cambodian factories, but you're literally having no impact. You're just trying to cancel out the bad impact that you're having. So it's really like a very intersectional issue, and it's not an easy solution to come up with because of the way that our world is built and because of most societies like obviously are capitalist. So it's a very, very difficult issue to deal with. So I would just say like when dealing with any company or dealing with any any entrepreneurial venture that like you want to start, you have to look at it in every single perspective, and it becomes that much more difficult. But I mean, it's probably going to be worth it because we don't have much longer.
Is there space for third party NGO badging or anything like that where they can run these studies to say it meets a certain mark, or in the case of the other one that you mentioned, like this isn't hitting the mark? Is there space in the I'm calling it badging. Is there another word for it, like like the good heart? I'm talking about. What I'm talking about. Is there room for that? For somebody to start something like that along this measure, or are there already groups that are putting? I'm sure there's some groups that are putting that stuff together. It's big money to sell a badge, but are there any? Is there space for another one like that to pop up that could conduct these analyses and promote it just for the good of the product rather than selling a badge? I don't know if you follow me.
There is, I can't remember the name right now, but there is a company that does that. However, they do but not with fashion, more with like textiles. But I could see like this idea of badging for textiles being replicated for fashion. The only issue is that they charge the company. So then you ask yourself, how many companies are really going to pay to get this badge when they can use it for something else? There's also B Corp that may not be a badge, but you do get some promotional benefit from it, or marketing benefit.
I was thinking about B Corp, and to the point where they charge the companies, that is it, and a lot of companies make a lot of money from that, and they may not be the most ethical companies that are doing that. But as I think we've learned through the digital space, there are millions of ways to monetize once you've built a community. So companies that are going to do the direct sale to, hey, give me 10 grand, put my badge on your thing. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to build a community around whatever the special badge that you have is. And then there's countless ways to monetize a community once you have it built. You don't have to go straight for the jugular in terms of getting cash out of companies. So I don't know if B Corp was definitely what I had in mind when I asked that question. So if there's space from an entrepreneurial perspective for somebody to create something like that, well, that's something. It's an
There are also
opportunity.
Yeah, there are also apps that rate fashion brands in terms of how ethical or how sustainable they are. I'm still looking for the one that I think works the best. I've tried one and I wasn't satisfied with it, so I'm gonna try other ones. I can't remember the names right now, but they are out there. You just have to really do your research and figure out which one works fairly well.
Create your own.
Create your own. Yeah, or like help others that have like done the bulk of the work continue. I think this idea of like always creating your own when like half of the work has been done is like reinventing the wheel. I believe a lot in partnerships and only creating it to fill the gap that they don't fill, but not to like do the same exact thing. It just makes no sense. I just keep finding the same exact product or like very similar products. I'm like, no, like you both don't work. But there is there are resources out there.
Okay, all right. I'm
Yeah,
buying.
there's some for sustainable fashion. There are others for like slavery. Like how many there's one like how many slaves did it take to build um your lifestyle basically, or the products you buy. So then the consumer becomes more conscious. I mean, people, you don't actually like this idea that we have to buy sustainable fashion. We don't have to. Like, we could just buy at the thrift store, or we can just stop buying clothes for a while, or we could, there's so many ways we can go around it. We can share. We can do a sharing with your neighbors, or with your friends or family that have this similar size. Or you can do in Brooklyn. We do a swap event. So then people would just come and they swap things. You give away things, you get things you like, and it's this idea that we want new things, but we can do it without necessarily having to produce more, which is also using energy and resources. There's so many ways around that, but without having to purchase something brand new.
I'd like to pitch in here since you mentioned what you want, and that's something that I really wanted to speak about. Uh, it's really important for us to realize if you want to become sustainable, if you want to live sustainably, you need to very clearly demarcate what you want from what you need. So, simply just not buying clothes because you don't need them at the moment can make a bigger difference than going and buying clothes which have the sustainable clothes tag on them, because you really don't know how authentic they are, and and then you're just following a fad, which is basically what all of these organizations or companies that try to sell sustainable items, I would say, are doing. Because living a sustainable lifestyle today has become something that a lot of people want to do, not only in their conscience, but also to not put it negatively, but it has become something like a social fad. And as much as it's really great, it can also mislead when it comes to things like this, which we had, which was earlier mentioned, as we don't really know how real it is. And sometimes the processing of the clothes has taken up more energy. So it's very important for us to understand that reducing our consumption becomes really important in this kind of a scenario. And then maybe if there is still that need, or even a small want, we could try something that we can like again was mentioned earlier, get on an app which is which has been possibly tested and tried and rated. So something like that.
I do have to say that we do have to close up. I apologize, but this has been a great conversation. I do have to put a plug and tell everyone to watch the documentary, The True Cost. It's on Netflix. And it talks about the sustainable fashion, just the fashion industry and how we can live more consciously. But I do want to say thank you. Thank you all. Maribel, Bethany, Ina, Garvita, Roger, thank you for being here. And I'm sorry to close so fast, but we will see you very, very soon. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.